Hey, welcome to The Long Game. We are on a mission to demystify the science that shapes our lives and to unpack how great ideas built here in Scotland become real-world medicines, devices, and new companies at the cutting edge of life sciences.
And Ross, because we share a passion for golf as well as for science, we know this is a game of patience. So it's no hype, just the long game.
Yep. I'm Ross Kagan, Regis Professor of Precision Medicine at University of Glasgow.
And I'm Sandy Weir, Tech Innovation Leader and Strategic Program Manager, joining from Edinburgh.
Good morning, Sandy. I am super excited for this one. So on The Long Game, we explore the collision of cells, code, and capital in the Scottish life sciences sector. Today, we're discussing a monumental shift in oncology that I have very much been on the learning curve. For decades, the entire focus of cancer research has been on survival, getting past the 5-year mark. But what actually happens when we actually succeed? What happens when a lethal disease becomes a chronic one?
And Ross, I'm just going to pause you there for a moment and ask, what is the collective noun for Regis Professors?
Ooh.
Because to answer these questions, we are joined today by a true heavyweight in the field. Professor Andrew Biankin is a Regis Professor, a Regis Chair of Surgery at University of Glasgow, world-renowned clinical scientist, former director of the Wolfson Vole Cancer Research Centre, driving force behind Precision Panc clinical trials. Andrew, it's our real pleasure to welcome you today to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Ross. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about a topic that's very dear to my heart and really try to change how we do things, not just the implementation, but also the mindset, because that seems to be the greatest challenge. My late mentor, Rob Sutherland, used to say, Andrew, the science is easy, the people are hard. And that's exactly the case.
That is so true. Let me just say, Andrew, I just want to fill in a little bit more. So Andrew's a fellow bio-entrepreneur. In fact, I've learned a ton from Andrew. I'm always going over there bugging him, as he well knows. So he's spun out Gabriel Precision Oncology with the idea of democratizing access to complex genomic data. So Andrew, it's fabulous having a fellow Regis Professor on the show. So yeah. Andrew, welcome to The Long Game, my friend.
Yeah, when I first got here, a friend of mine from the US said on a visit, "Man, how did they give you this job?" So.
Well, we're about to find out, Andrew, because you're going to have a bunch of amazing answers to some of our questions, and I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from this discussion with you today. And I really want to dive right in, and I want to start looking at the kind of sheer scale and challenge of the numbers. And you very kindly shared with us before the show today some of the data, and I wanted to try and share some of my understanding, trying to interpret that data. Mm-hmm. And I think what we're at just now is we can see that there are now 10 times more people living with cancer. These are new. These are not the sort of newly diagnosed patients. These are long-term living with cancer, and that fundamentally changes the math of healthcare. So, can you tell us what's changed in terms of cancer care over the last 20 years that's led to this massive increase in population of people living long-term survivors of cancer?
So, systemic cancer therapy was often considered as pure palliation. But things have changed over the last 25 years, particularly since we've started making drugs towards targets. Rather than boiling up something from the bottom of the ocean or boiling up the leaves of a tree, we started actually understanding biology and focusing drugs on those particular things. In fact, people often argue whether precision medicine actually works, but they often forget that the first example of precision medicine is tamoxifen and all of its derivatives discovered in the 70s. And so tamoxifen and its derivatives has probably provided more health benefit for cancer patients than all other drugs combined, until perhaps recently. For us to think that we cure cancer, well, we can cure it, if you think it cures, of the 50% of cancers that are cured, 90% of those are cured by surgery, 5 to 6% are cured by radiotherapy, and 3 to 4% are cured by systemic therapy. And if you think about the investment in society, this is where investment is reverse. We spend a lot of time, energy, and money generating new drugs, often for incremental benefit. We don't know if they're going to work ahead of time for an individual patient. And that's a whole other topic of discussion about better patient selection in drug development and in treatment.
Sure.
But what has happened, we have converted a lot of lethal cancers into chronic diseases. And so, since the year 2000, we have 4 to 5 times the number of people living with cancer. And if you think about what's happening in Scotland, 30,000, 32,000 new cancers diagnosed per year. There's probably around 300 odd thousand living with cancer, and we just don't look after them properly. It's a big issue all around the world. In fact, in some countries like Canada, there are specialists that just deal with this. And the term for it is called supportive oncology. The drain on the health system is enormous. We're not looking after them. We need to look after them better. And I'm sad to say that our government solutions around the world is assisted suicide. So we can't look after you properly. We can't treat your pain. We can't treat this. We can't treat that because we just don't have that, the wherewithal or the resources to do so. So here's an easy solution for you. People say that this is important, and sure, it is important to have a choice on whether you die or not. But as a healthcare system, this has been happening for decades. Passive euthanasia has always been a thing. It happens very occasionally. Sure, there are some instances of active euthanasia, and Dignitas is an example of that in Switzerland. But now to have that in mainstream healthcare, to me, is a challenge. Being a doctor for all of my life, looking after cancer patients for over 30 years, how do we look after these people? It's not as sexy as developing new drugs. I'm looking for a cure for cancer. But once we've expended all of this as a community, all this energy, all this effort, as you said, Ross, to get them to a point where they're living with their cancer. And I can tell you dozens of examples of my own patients where, they were meant to live for 6 months, and 12 years later, they're still alive. So if we've done the hard yards and we're increasing survival for cancer, why do we not look after these people? It's not complicated, but it does take a lot of resource because there's a lot of people that need our help.
Can I just jump in and just quickly say that, so you being Andrew, you had talked about this, we've discussed this recently, and I just hadn't thought much about this, and that's why, Sandy, you and I had this discussion about this would be an important topic to bring here to this podcast. Honestly, it's just something I just not focused much on. I guess you could argue on the numbers that we should be paying more attention to these patients than the cancer patients.
Yes, well, it's an opportunity cost. What's the size of the budget? How much resource have you got?
Right.
Where do you go with that? I think there needs to be a reframing of the whole system. So at the moment, the way we're going with treatment of any disease, if you think about it at a healthcare delivery level, 50% or more of the healthcare budget is spent on the last 6 to 9 months of life. It doesn't take a genius to work out that most of what we're doing isn't really working.
Right.
So think about the cancer journey now. A patient comes in, we start with first-line treatment. So think about the patient journey. You come in, you've got a cancer, you need systemic treatment, the cancer spread. You've had your surgery a while ago to remove the primary cancer, but it's come back in the liver or the lungs and you need the treatment. So what's on offer? This is what's on the supermarket shelf. The guidelines say we need to give this treatment first because, on average, it's a 40% chance that it's going to benefit you. We don't know about you as an individual. We just know that it's on 40% on average. Then you get that treatment. It doesn't work. You do a scan in 3 months, and your doc scratches their heads going, well, maybe it's a little bit bigger. Is it pseudoprogression? Is it this? Oh, we don't really know. We'll check it again in 3 months, keep going on the treatment. And meanwhile, the patient's bedbound, suffering from all the side effects, all these sorts of things. Maybe spends a bit of time in hospital as a result, maybe even a week in intensive care, all these costs that are never counted. And then they get to the doc at 6 months and they go, look at the scan, and the doc goes, shit, it's going, we need to give you second line therapy now. So we get another one off the shelf because the guidelines say this is the one you do second. So it's trial and error. If it's only working in 30 or 40% and you're getting complications from it, patients having a terrible life, huge burden on the health system. If you knew ahead of time exactly to a certain percentage which treatment was going to work. So you said, we've predicted that for you, first-line therapy has only got a 5% chance of success. But second-line therapy has a 10% chance of success. But third-line therapy, well, that's got an 80% chance of success. Do we really need to go first line, second line, and if the patient manages to survive, give them the third line? Even if you had a test to tell you that, the regulations wouldn't let you go straight to third line. In some jurisdictions, maybe you can go off-piste. And this is something I did for a while, which is to off-piste oncology, treat patients that don't want to go to the health system because that's the supermarket. Whatever's on the shelf. You give us the best advice we can and we'll do what we need to do in that context.
Yeah, that's fascinating and and very enlightening. And I guess one of the big passions that Ross and I have that really kind of motivated us for this podcast was really starting to move the dial on generating interest around a startup community, around spin out from university and that whole entrepreneurial piece. So from an entrepreneurial and commercial standpoint, these new treatments, what does that mean for the biotech industry? Do we need to change focus? How do we play in this environment that you've described?
So it comes back to patent law. So if you make a new treatment, it's a composition of matter. Here's the pill, okay? You want the pill, this is how much it costs, otherwise you don't get the pill. Versus a methods patent can be very difficult to police and patrol. So in the current health system, what is the most critical inflection point with regard to patient care and cost? It's the decision made by the doc. And guess what the cheapest part of the whole value chain is? The person who makes that decision. And they make that decision without much support. They based it on their experience, what they know, what they've learnt in high school, their own personal biases. You know, somebody once quoted that 50% of what a doctor knows is incorrect. Unfortunately, they don't know which 50%. So you're making decisions based on which treatments you used to give. What if you had a test that could facilitate that? The pathway from the commercial sense is very challenging. Nobody likes black boxes, and many of these diagnostic tests that are on the market, only a few of them, like Oncotype DX and others, they manage to get through with this sort of black box thing. Now you need to expose all of this, and the minute you do that, you've got no value. So all the investment in developing a diagnostic that gives you, the docs, the power to make a more informed decision, gives patients the power to make a more informed decision, is a diagnostic test. We can do a lot of that now. We can do that in research use only space. Getting that across the line with the regulators, they're a long way behind where they should be. They're trying, but patient selection is critical. They're managing to work with single fixed biomarkers. Now they want some biological rationale, which is a bit of a pie in the sky, to be honest. What happens if you have a moving target? You have an algorithm where you input clinical tests that are already available, large gene panel plus an on-slide transcriptome, very inexpensive in comparison. They look at the price and say, gosh, that's 4,000 or 5,000 US dollars, that's too expensive. While they spend 5,000 a day on a patient in intensive care because they've given them some crap therapy that isn't going to help them at all.
Yeah. So I think there's two things I would pick out from that, Andrew, and two big challenges. I guess the first one is, and you're absolutely right, you know, that black box is that's the intellectual property, right? That's not the part that you really want to open up. But at the same time, that's the regulatory nightmare, because how do you regulate that black box? And that makes it very, very difficult to bring these solutions to market. So I guess that's one part I'd like you to consider in terms of, you know, give us some ideas about how you address that sort of challenge. And then I guess the second part, I'll just give you the follow-up before you answer. And then you've got free run to answer this question. The second part is, well, maybe there's also a need for us to move away from looking at improving these cures and treatments and really divert attentions to how we manage or how we create devices and approaches, platforms, technologies that will help to manage that long-term care pathway. What do you think of both of those parts?
Yeah, so the question of the diagnostic, the pathway, is a difficult one. There are people working on this. There's literature around it. It is a challenge. The black box solution is not the solution. There needs to be some other solution to be found. But the challenge isn't just around the commercialization space. You know, for example, we're trying to publish a manuscript now that has an AI algorithm that predicts therapeutic response. The journal reviewers want us to put the source code up to be freely available. So having known a number of colleagues that have done that in the academic space, that instantly kills the whole thing, because nobody supports it, nobody looks after it. Within 6 months it's defunct and nobody ever uses it. So the surefire way to kill progress is to publish your source code. What are the potential solutions for this? Well, there are guidelines now coming out as to what level of explainability needs to exist in order for you to be able to use this. There will be some black box component, but it's not a full black box, so that you have to retain some of that IP or somehow change patent laws and be able to police them better. Your answer with the chronic disease component, looking after patients that we've helped, it's a twofold answer. The first answer is you need to release some resource. Our current trajectory is unsustainable. If most of what we're doing isn't working, if we change that, even just slightly, more resource will become available. It's opportunity cost, it's health economics. Better understanding of the cost of giving treatments that don't work would be very helpful as well, because then you're saying, well, you know, this is what we can do. But it needs a different decision-making process. I won't mention which government this was, but it was a health system. And we had this great idea, is that if you do this simple genomic panel test, we can tell you ahead of time which patients won't respond to this expensive antibody drug in colorectal cancer, because a third of them will never respond. We know which are the resistant genes, we know what they are, but we don't test for them. And everybody said, what a great idea, we're going to save 30% of our drug budget on this, and that's going to be X millions. And the actual test itself is going to cost a fraction of that. What a great idea. We didn't get there because the drug budget sat separately from the diagnostic budget, and the diagnostic budget had nowhere to move, and it wasn't going to benefit them, and there was no way of shifting the drug budget to the diagnostic budget.
We all know
so the
how
science
this
is
goes.
easy, the people are hard.
Yeah, indeed. And just one sort of final thought from me. Where do you see screening really making an impact here? Because, of course, we read a lot and we understand that, you know, that in order for the economics of the health service to work, we need to get ahead of the disease. We need to be able to proactively identify the disease when it's very early. Stage 1 cancer much easier to treat than stage 3, stage 4, and the economics, of course, of early treatment are vastly better than the economics of late treatment. And we want to move away from this reactionary episodic model of healthcare to one that's more proactive and anticipatory. So do you think we're at the cusp of our health service, our governments actually taking the plunge and making that investment and trying to move the dial?
So I'll talk about wellness first. From a wellness perspective, yes, completely agree. That's exactly where we need to go as a society. And it's not just putting on a sugar tax, putting on a salt tax. It's more complex than that. It's not just about smoking cessation and drink cessation. Changing people's habits is very difficult. But having an outlook that is different as a society and having an incentive to be able to do that, I think is important. You've asked the wrong person about whether screening for early detection is actually worthwhile. It doesn't work. So once you have cancer, and it's your trajectory is determined by the molecular aspects of that cancer, no matter what size it is. The tiniest cancers in the world are often the most deadliest, and they're the cancers of unknown primary, where you never know they originated from. If you look at the screening studies, the incremental benefit for actual cancer is very small. You have the misdiagnosis of precursor lesions, like in breast cancer. The treatment of precursor lesions, precancerous lesions in the cervix is the classic example. And in colonoscopy, the treatment of polyps. So the treatment of precursor lesions is what makes the difference, not the treatment of the cancer. So it is detection and treatment of precursor lesions. The problem with that is that there's an awful lot of them. You don't know which ones are going to progress. And sometimes you can do more harm than good. We know that some cystic lesions in the pancreas progress to cancer, the rate of which is about 1%. But if we take a pancreas out, the mortality is 2 to 3%. So you're going to kill 3 people for each person that you save.
And this is the dichotomy, isn't it? The overdiagnosis and overtreatment, the dangers of that, and this sort of complex space around cancer.
Yeah, so we're curing so much more prostate cancers because they weren't going to kill us anyway, but the cure rates have gone through the roof. If you live to the age of 80, as men, 80% of us will have prostate cancer. It's just not going to kill us.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah, I think the whole issue about whether early detection is actually a thing is probably something we should do a podcast on.
Maybe we should focus the discussion.
Yeah, because I actually, like Andrew, I know a little bit about this data, and I would say I'm dubious for the most part that that the data just doesn't support it, and that shouldn't be a blanket statement. There are almost certainly some examples, but for every example you can give where it's had some benefit, the massive overdiagnosis is swamps that, as you say, Andrew. And so I'm getting to a point, which is so you've actually given a very thoughtful discussion on a lot of the issues that I have cancer, I'm treated with cancer, now it's a chronic low-level disease. What is my quality of life going forward? So I just have a couple of questions, and then I think I'm good. One is one of the fundamental problems with cancer is that it's really complex, and actually the patients are, and the point that you're making is actually a very complicated one. So I just had a couple questions. One is, why are we so bad at dealing with these sorts of questions? Because if you just write it down, it's pretty clear where our resources should go to, and yet we never seem to get there. And while you're at it, I'm going to put you on the spot, all right? Which is, so let's get to it. If you had a room full of Scottish biotech investors and policymakers sitting there in your beautiful, beautiful home right now, where would you tell them to aim their capital?
Okay. The first question.
Yeah. Why are we so
Early
bad?
detection is a easy sell. If you're a funding body, we're going to detect cancer early, we're going to cure it. Lots of donors come in. The engine keeps spinning. It's not attacking the problem. It's an easy sell. That's it. And that's why it's popular. That's why, oh yeah, we're going to detect cancer early. We're going to make a big splash. Look at Grail. We're going to detect all of this early. You could have told those guys it wasn't going to work.
Yeah, it didn't go so well.
Yeah. But we learned some stuff, and the stuff that we actually learned from it is not being used. So that's another whole discussion in general. If I had policymakers, people that can make decisions at the other end, together with investors about how we're going to change things, it would be a reshaping of the health system. So you would invest at critical points, patient selection, number one, making those decisions, creating frameworks to say, well, if you have all these options for treatments, the standard of care, say for pancreatic cancer, and your 2-year survival is still less than 10%, you don't really have a standard of care. You want to unlock the door for being able to try new treatments. Pancreatic cancer, one of the treatments is FOLFIRINOX. It's very difficult to combine any drug with FOLFIRINOX. So that puts your first line studies, bang, they're done. That's not going to happen. The other aspect is that there's a lot of perception, and there's a lot of how do I put this, rigid thinking in oncology. There needs to be some flexibility in that, the ability for docs to make more independent decisions. And this was quashed by, Morissachi's bill was quashed, or at least diluted heavily, not to be able to go off-piste. There's a lot of off-piste things to do. Baroness Tessa Jowell identified that, and we had the Tessa Jowell mission around that. So the flexibility to do that, and perhaps a different pricing model for pharma, so you don't just approve and pay for anything. You say, you get paid when the patient benefits.
That's
you and the doctor can decide whichever treatment they want.
I'm a fan of this.
If it doesn't work, you don't get paid.
Totally, you get paid for results, 100%.
So the risk is put back onto pharma about the treatment, and that changes the dynamics, because then you've got to demonstrate benefit, not in just one clinical trial of a hyper-selected group with incremental benefit for a population. You need to adjust that model.
Totally. Well, so let's bring this to a close, because so first of all, I just want to jump back and acknowledge a point that you had made about assisted suicide. This is a complicated question. We're not going to actually really address this here, but I did want to shout out one point you made, which is a key one, which is, however you feel about it, I think we can all agree that if we're going to allow this, it has to be the end of having done right by our patient population and giving them every chance to not have to face that decision. And only when those options have been cleared should we be having the discussion about what comes next. So I just want to acknowledge that
I completely agree. I completely agree, but I don't trust them.
Well, so this is going to be, like I said, I'm going to give you the last point on that. The other thing is that this is really a topic. So I'm a researcher. You're a researcher, but also a clinician. I'm straight up researcher. And for me, it was just, well, let's just bludgeon these diseases until they cry uncle. We'll get them cured. People will be willing to put up with whatever terrible things we do to them. But, we often talk about the valley of death in drug discovery. But it's interesting to think about this valley of death for patients trying to basically navigate life after they get their treatment. And so I really do appreciate, Andrew, you opening this door. It's something I had not thought a lot about, something I'm certainly going to think more about in terms of where we should be putting our focus. So all of this, so first of all, thank you very much for that.
Pleasure.
Yeah. So now is let's dial the intensity down a little bit, okay? This has been a very intense conversation, but Sandy, are we ready?
Yeah, it has. It's been quite sobering, but a deeply necessary conversation. And Andrew, your work has been pushing the boundaries of precision oncology, and we're very, very grateful for you taking the time today to share your insights. But I think we're going to move on to the wee bit of joy part.
Yeah, I think we have a promise here, Andrew. I believe you've brought a little bit of wee bit of joy. I'm looking forward. Show me.
And
show us.
And the reason it's a wee bit of joy is that I started writing. I started cooking during lockdown in the winter, where there wasn't much else to do, and I was scribbling little notes on printouts. And I'd go back to cook the recipe again, and I couldn't work out what I'd written. I couldn't even read my own writing half the time. So I started writing a little notebook, and I got to page 3 or 4, and a friend came around and said, "Oh, you're writing a cookbook?" I said, "Nah, I couldn't be asked. Come on, you've got to do all of this sort of stuff, type it all up. I couldn't be bothered." So she said, no, your writing's fine. Just get it scanned and get it printed. So I got it scanned, sent it to the printer, and went, no, you need to format every page. So I sort of put a few little funny things, and this guy here, Kagan, would come in and go, "No, that looks like crap, you better fix it."
Yeah,
Right,
that's basically what I said.
So what turned into a little notebook turned into the first book, and now I have a second book, which I just received the proofs for.
Right.
And it took hours and hours and hours, and this is it.
Wow.
And it's called, it's part of the Space series. It's a series of 5 books. The first one is Inner Space. The second one is Outer Space. The third is Deep Space. The fourth is Lost in Space. And the last one is Spaced Out. Spelt in that particular way. The USP of the book is evolved into understanding the science behind cooking. Not in-depth chemical reactions, but why you do certain things. And to really unlock your own creativity in how you can cook yourself without having to follow a recipe. You just sort of make shit up. And it's really satisfying. So
Well,
that's my
and I
bit of
just
joy.
want to jump into your little moment of wee bit of joy and say that as a New Yorker, I worked on you hard enough that finally you actually make a killer pastrami. All right, I got to give you that. Yeah,
It was
but
made to your taste.
it took
Ross.
work. It took work.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Ross looks forward to his birthday every year, then he gets a bit of pastrami.
Ah, it's coming up,
When
man.
I was hearing you describe the various different stages there, Andrea, why was I tempted to go straight to book number 5, Spaced Out, straight away?
Yeah, because by the time he publishes that, drugs will be legal here, the way they are in New York.
Well, there are
Just the brownie section alone will be amazing.
there are drugs in natural compounds. Well, as you know, the mushrooms. There are people that perform screens on natural compounds using PD biomarkers to look for efficacy for some of the big drugs. Yeah, so that's my next little entrepreneurial play.
Yeah,
Oh,
understood.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Look forward to
What about you, Sandy?
finding out more about that. Well, this weekend has been a big weekend in the Weir household. My daughter was a bridesmaid at her school friend's wedding. The wedding took place in St Andrews. I love going to St Andrews. I love any opportunity to go to St Andrews. There was Kaylee dancing. It was a long celebration into the night. It was a wonderful day. But the real sort of icing on the cake was that the next day, my wife Helen and I, we managed to go to the outdoor sauna at the West Sands in St Andrews. Now we've been chalking these off. We've been going around the country. We love going to these outdoor saunas now, and it's quite magical. You get a fantastic view from the sauna out onto the whatever part of the seashore you are. And yeah, the North Sea is as cold as it looks at this time of year, but it's truly invigorating. So there are several of these now dotted around the coast. There's a few in Fife, Ely, Kingsbarn, St Andrews. Go look them up on the web. Go investigate them. and really enjoy the experience. It's fabulous.
Well, you could have a round of golf at King's Barnes and let's have the outdoor sauna afterwards.
That's heaven, isn't it? That's absolute heaven.
Perfect.
What about you, Ross? What's been exciting you this week?
Yeah, no, I was trying to see if I could share here, but I guess that's not going to work. So, so my little wee bit of joy is last Thursday, I joined actually by Sandy. There was the Scotland Life Sciences Awards dinner night, which happens every year, and happened downtown Glasgow. And to really understand why this was a wee bit of joy for me, because honestly, I was a little up and down about even going to this thing. I think I kvetched to Andrew a little bit about this. But then I realized the real purpose of why I actually came here to Scotland 6 years ago. And really, the point of that was to wear a kilt, let's be honest. Everybody who comes to Scotland, the first thing they're thinking of is, hey, do I get to wear a kilt? So the problem is, of course, I don't know anything about kilts. I don't know how to buy a kilt. But magically, there is this magic person that just, I don't know what to say. I'm actually crying a little bit right now. Who happens to be a very similar build to me, who owns the full set of kilt. Okay? So with a little tweak from it, I borrowed a full kilt set from Andrew. I ditched the shirt and the socks and all the things that had color to them. I wore all black underneath it to celebrate my actual New Yorkness and whatever else, black soul, I guess, and showed up there with a kilt. What did you think, Sandy? How did I do?
Actually, I thought you rocked the look, Ross. I thought you really killed it. You're looking great. And in fact, the University of Glasgow table, there was a few kilts as well, wasn't there? David Lowe was dressed up. Yeah, you all look fabulous. It was fantastic to see. I really appreciate the effort that you took. And now I know the secret. I'm also grateful to Andrew as well for lending you the full Highland dress.
So finally, after 6 years here in Scotland, I feel like a true and genuine Scot. So Andrew, I got to thank you for that. For the pastrami, first and foremost. But secondly, I got to thank you for that.
So the key question is, did you wear underpants under the kilt?
Well, that's going to be its own podcast, of course. But probably not this podcast.
That's a different podcast altogether.
That'll be an OnlyFans podcast.
I think we're getting to the end, guys.
Yeah, I think we've hit the back end of this. So a massive thank you, Andrew, Regis Professor Andrew Biankin. Oh, it's been amazing. As you know, I've been looking forward for years to interview you on a podcast. You're a very smart dude. Thank you for gracing our podcast.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
It was a pleasure, guys. Great to chat. Great questions too.
Great, and we'll be back next week, I guess, with another deep dive somewhere in the Scottish life sciences ecosystem. I can't exactly remember where that is at the moment because I have I should have that prepped. Unless you can remember,
it's
Ross,
in Glasgow.
Can you remember?
Oh yeah, next week we're going to do Cancer 101.
Yeah, we're going to do Cancer 101. Great.
That's right. So we can help fill in some of the blanks of some of the things that Andrew's been talking about.
Perfect.
So until next time, folks. Keep the heed, see, Scottish, and keep playing the long game.
Yeah, see the vision clear. We're here to run the long game. Blueprint set, no fear. Playing out the long game.